The bitter cold of December bit deep into the bones of every man. Survival was a flickering flame that threatened to vanish in the wind. A tattered flag whipped violently against the freezing northern gale. Ragged burlap sacks were the only protection against the frozen earth. Exhausted men huddled together under thin blankets dusted with snow. Through the mud and misery walked a man of unrelenting determination. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment of shared and silent desperation. Orders were passed in hushed whispers as the camp began to stir. The heavy thud of boots on frozen ground echoed through the trees. The Delaware River churned with massive and jagged blocks of white ice. Men heaved a heavy wooden boat into the black and freezing currents. Rough and icy wood was the only thing to hold onto in the darkness. The hull groaned as a massive chunk of ice ground against the side. A stoic silhouette stood at the bow against the swirling gray mist. Strength was found in the general's unwavering and silent posture. Freezing water sprayed over the men as ice crashed into the boat. Long poles were used to push away the grinding and dangerous ice. A thick blanket of snow began to turn the world into a blur of white. The boat finally thudded against the muddy bank of the far shore. Burlap-wrapped feet sank deep into the freezing and muddy mire. The long march began as a line of men limped into the darkness. Each step left a dark and crimson stain in the fresh white powder. This trail of blood was a grim path of sacrifice for a new nation. A comrade reached down to haul a fallen brother back to his feet. Rain mixed with snow to turn the road into a treacherous sheet of glass. Words of quiet encouragement were offered to the freezing column. The first gray light of dawn began to bleed through the heavy clouds. The town square was eerily quiet under a peaceful layer of snow. A sentry leaned against a post, oblivious to the shadows in the trees. Musket locks were kept dry under coats as eyes focused on the target. A sword was raised, catching the dull and cold morning light. The silence was shattered by a primal and desperate roar of men. A cloud of sulphurous smoke erupted into the cold and biting air. Splinters flew as a cannonball smashed into a wooden barricade. Confused soldiers scrambled out of stone houses into the chaos. Fear was replaced by a fierce resolve as the young man charged. Flashes of orange light pierced through the heavy morning mist. A wave of blue and brown coats poured into the narrow streets. Weapons were thrown down in surrender as the commander fell. The young soldier stood in the square as the smoke began to clear. Captured muskets and drums lay in the snow as symbols of victory. His hands were steady now. The trembling finally gone at last. Faces were weary, but illuminated by a new and powerful pride. The tattered unit now stood in a straight and disciplined line. A hand on a shoulder was a silent gesture of profound thanks. The flag was raised over the town as the sun broke through clouds. Back at the riverbank, the harsh winter light began to soften. Ice floes began to crack and melt into the flowing water. Washington looked back across the river toward the path traveled. A hopeful expression remained as the sun set in a golden glow.